Good afternoon. And welcome to Salem United Church of Christ. And I want to offer a special warm welcome to anyone who's joining us online. We have been offering all of our programs through live stream, and they're also available for watching later. So they're all on recordings on our YouTube channel. Just look up Salem UCC, Verona, Wisconsin on YouTube. My name is Sarah Punt, and I'm the Director of Christian Education and Youth Ministry here at Salem. We have been providing an exhibit and a speaker series on the topic of mental health and mental illness since February 19th. And today is the final installment of that speaker series and the final day that the exhibit will be open for viewing. Our goal with this project was to eliminate the stigma that surrounds mental health and mental illness and the challenges that different populations face. So we have focused on specific populations, including addiction and youth, grief, loss, and trauma. And today we're going to be focusing on the senior members of our population and the unique mental health and mental illness challenges that they face as part of the natural aging process. For those of you that are here in person, I ask that if you have not, when you leave, to please sign in on the clipboard by the door. I applied for a grant to help fund our project, and one of the measures I told them I would report on is attendance. You do not need to leave your name unless you choose to. It's really more helping us track what age group of people participated and how they learned about our program, whether it was from the newspaper or you were invited or you're a member of the church or what have you. With any of our mental health topics, we've repeated this every single time. This is meant for information purposes. We are not a counseling organization and we are not medical professionals. We do, however, when we're discussing mental health, sometimes it becomes very sensitive. And if you are finding yourself distressed, uncomfortable, and you feel you need to step out for a moment, feel free to do that. Take care of yourself, take a break. If you find that you are really needing some support, please speak to me after. If I'm not able to help you, I will stay with you until we find someone who can. So please know that this is a safe space, and I want you to do what you need to do for your well-being. So today, as I mentioned, our focus is going to be on seniors and their mental health needs. And we have two speakers that are here today with both their topic areas really complement each other very well. And so I think we're very fortunate that they collaborate with each other to discuss the areas that they're going to focus on. Lori Anderson is here, and she's the Director of McFarland Senior Outreach Services. And Drake Dino is here from the Verona Senior Center, and he's a case manager there. And we're going to start with Lori, and then when she's finished, we'll have Jake take the floor. So Lori, I welcome you to come forward and share your expertise with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As she said, I'm Lori Anderson, and I am with McFarland Senior Outreach Services. I'm not going to talk a great deal about this, but how we're structured, I know, has been kind of a confusing thing for a lot of people. So with Dane County, they do it a little bit differently than they do at other counties. So we have the ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, which is kind of a one-stop shop. People can call, they can get referred. It's all short-term information and assistance. From that point, there's the Area Agency on Aging, which used to be kind of a completely separate thing. Now they are cohabitating in the same offices on Sherman Avenue. And under the Area Agency on Aging, what they have is what we call focal points. Some are senior centers, and some are just services. So we are just services. We're under the Village of McFarland. We're hoping to get a senior center, but Verona has both. They have the case management, and then they have the senior center as well. So that kind of explains a little bit the hierarchy of how the services for the aging work. And there's case managers across the county that Dane County provides some funding for, and most of it then comes from the municipalities that they serve or other entities. So in other counties, this does not exist in this way. So we're really fortunate that Dane County does this. But I have worked in senior services and aging and mental health for a long time. And this has been kind of one of my passions, to work in mental health services. Now we just serve any client that comes in our door through the senior services. But aging and mental health definitely is a factor. Contrary to what most people believe, depression is not a normal sign of aging. Some people will chalk that up and just say, well, they're 85, of course they're depressed. But, you know, I mean, we chuckle, but then it's really not. You know, you talk to some people and they'll say, oh my gosh, you know, my dad was so vibrant, and then all of a sudden he's not. What's going on? So there's a lot of different things that can go on with seniors on how they can present a mental health need. And I'm just going to list some of those. Some of it is sleep problems, an increase in health complaints, a lack of appetite, sometimes cognitive changes, or changes in what we call ADLs or IADLs. ADLs are like eating, bathing, grooming, walking, dressing, undressing, transferring from a chair to another chair, and then going to the bathroom. Instrumental or IADLs are like housework, financial management, shopping, preparing meals, communications, medical, med management, managing transportation, driving, telephone, and handling mail. Excuse me. And those are some of the things that you most often catch first. You know, gosh, I come to mom's and I open the refrigerator and there's a lot of uneaten food in there. Or, wow, I got a call from the power company that she hadn't paid her bill for a while. Those can be signs of mental health, or they can be signs of dementia, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit. Excuse me. Some of the compounding issues as we age are a number of things. Loss of routine, that's a huge thing. When you stop working, you know, they always say keep a routine. But having a loss of routine really does make a difference on people's mental health. A loss of support or family dynamics, and that can be a number of things. Sometimes it's the loss of a spouse, a loss of a child. Sometimes it can be that the family is not getting along. But oftentimes what we've been seeing lately is a new term that I just wanted to bring up, and it's called aging orphans. And I know that's an interesting name, but what it is, it's seniors who don't have any support here. You know, their daughter may live in Denver, or you know, their son may have passed away before them, and they relied on them for a lot of things. So they don't have anybody that they can rely on. So they're really looking to make that support with other people, whether it be through the senior center, whether it be you know, in other groups, and Drake is going to talk about that, but that's a really important thing, the church community. There's also additional stressors on finances. You know, we've had a tough time the last couple of years, people who are living on just Social Security and retirement benefits, they're losing purchasing power. It's very distressing to them. The cost of housing has gone up greatly, so that's a big thing. Excuse me. There's also health changes. hearing loss, vision loss. That all accounts for a change in your mood. Sometimes functional decline if you aren't walking as well, or you have an ongoing issue. Pain is one of those ongoing issues. Those with chronic pain are twice as likely to attempt suicide. So pain is not something to push down. It really is something to address and look at. Sometimes it's a fear over loss of independence or control. Even the terms that we use. My parents are both deceased, but I remember, when we were looking at placing my mom after my dad had passed, very often people will use, well, you're putting her in a home, right? And I really take offense to that because we're not putting anybody anywhere. What we are doing is we are working with them to place them in a place where they get their support. So be careful with the verbs that you use, the words that you use when you talk about those things, because that implies something completely different, that they are not party of that decision. So that is a big fear for many of our seniors. And even when they're in a facility, maintaining a lot of their control or their independence is still a very important thing. I've been on that end too, working with in those types of settings, and that's even small decisions can be empowering. Another thing is alcohol and drug use. It is not new to seniors. They might have had a lifetime of alcohol and drug use. They might not have. It might have been something that happened after they retired or after they started having pain, that they started using alcohol to numb the pain. It might be after grief. But there usually is some reason behind it, that either their alcohol use had been under control for a long time, or it's a new issue that has come up. And very often, it's not asked of them. Getting used to asking somebody, do you use alcohol, and how much is considered normal is not always part of a physical. But that is something that you have to look at. Hoarding. You hear a lot about the hoarding issues. There's also mental health issues behind that. So it is a diagnosis in and of itself, but there's also a reason behind hoarding and why that occurred and when that occurred. And was it a lifetime event or was it later? Also the pre-existing mental health diagnosis. There are a lot of people that function with mental health diagnoses in the world. Bipolar, depression, anxiety, that have been able to keep them under control, hold jobs, have families, and live a normal life. But then all of a sudden they're hit with these other things, and pretty soon they're not doing so well. So you have to look at, have they had this problem or this issue their whole life, or is it something new? And then also the LGBTQ status. That is something that even as we deal with the older population, we see people who had come out maybe 5 years ago. They've lived their whole life, they've had a family, and maybe they said, you know what, I really am not living my true self. I finally feel comfortable in doing that. And that is a big factor on how they identify, how comfortable they feel with groups, and whether or not they're feeling supported with that. Some of them, as you have heard, they risk the shunning of their family or their other supports because of that. And that's a huge thing. So it happens even in the older population. The suicide risk for men over 65 is actually higher than for teens and young adults. The elderly represent 18% of all suicides and only 12% of the population. So the greatest risk is loneliness and social isolation. And it increases, the ideation for suicide increases the more difficult it becomes for a senior. It's 1 to 5% for community elders, 11.5% for hospitalized elders, and 13.5% for elders that are requiring care. So you do hear about that. Some of the things, what we call the 4 Ds of suicide, are depression, disease or disability, disconnectedness, and deadly means. So sometimes you'll hear a doctor who may ask a loved one who is having a mental health crisis, do you have any guns in your home? Have you thought about hurting yourself? And you're kind of taken aback. It happened with my father, as far as the doctor asking him that question, and I thought, oh my gosh, why are they asking him that? Now, he didn't indicate that he wanted to do any harm, but it was a valid question at the time. His health was declining quite a bit. He had been a very independent, stubborn man, and he was losing control. So that's one way to maintain control. And it became an eye-opener for all of us, I think, too, that you have to take a look at that. So don't be afraid to ask or have your doctor ask your loved one if you really are feeling that they are thinking of suicide in any way, if they're making comments or anything like that. It's really a good idea to get them to the doctor to be evaluated. One of the things as you look at mental health is to look at, is it medical or is it mental health, or is it both? So you start out with a medical exam, and then sometimes they can do a neurological or cognitive testing. I was just speaking to somebody, it was a vitamin deficiency that had happened to a loved one. Or it can be a number of other things. Other diseases sometimes will mask as a depression or as a mental health need, Parkinson's being one of them. You get a flat affect. You don't have any quick responses to things. You're shuffling a little bit more. That is completely different than a depression if you have Parkinson's, and it has to be treated differently. So knowing those distinctions is really important. Again, pre-existing conditions, whether you have comorbidities, and what I mean by that is if you have heart disease, if you have diabetes, if you have other factors like that. And then what is that person's baseline? What were they like before? What are they like now? One of the things that we see is working with veterans. There is a veterans organization, but a lot of times they don't go to them directly. They'll come to the senior center, or they'll come to us. And are they experiencing side effects of that? We had one man, he was showing all the signs of like a schizophrenia, hallucinating and everything else. He had been exposed to Agent Orange. He had shared that with us. He had been receiving money for that. But we didn't know if what we were seeing was related to that or not. What happened was he actually was experiencing a different type of dementia that was going on, and it wasn't a mental illness. It was not that he was seeing hallucinations. He was seeing his loved ones talking to him, and he knew that that wasn't right, but he couldn't understand if that was real or if it was not. So rather than just saying that he was schizophrenic and putting him on schizophrenia meds, he went through an extensive evaluation to be evaluated, and it made a big difference in his quality of life. Sometimes it's the medications that we take, even the over-the-counter. People talk about that all the time, but over-the-counter and supplements, I'm not going to go into each thing, but there are certain ones that you have to be careful with. There's such a thing, it's called the BEERS, BEERS list, which is a list of medications that they look at on whether or not that could have an effect on your psychomotor skills, your mental health. Some of them, antihistamines, just over-the-counter antihistamines. You take them enough, it slows your central nervous system. Anxiety and depression meds. Again, those are not over-the-counter, but still. Sleep aids, anything that you take for sleep. Some people can't even take melatonin. That can cause some issues. Muscle relaxants. You've had a hurt back and the doctor gave you muscle relaxants, and all of a sudden, you're not thinking clearly. You're having incontinence problems, you're falling. That can be a variety of that. Incontinence meds, that's a big one, that they can cause some changes in cognitive status. And again, as I said, over-the-counter medications or supplements, please let your doctor know everything that you're on, even if it's short-term. If you're exhibiting some changes, that is a huge thing. There is such a thing called delirium, if you've ever heard of it. It is a medical emergency. It's when I get a call from somebody who says, gosh, you know, my mom, she is acting really weird. There's something really wrong with her. Well, when did this start? Yeah, you know, yesterday or the day before. Well, and you know, she's not able to hold her urine anymore. There's just a lot of issues. I'm not sure what's going on. Well, all of that is a sign of a potential UTI, urinary tract infection. And it does affect seniors cognitively, significantly, where they can have something go from a simple urinary tract infection to being septic, which is deadly, in a very, very short time. So getting emergency help, or at least getting a call to the doctor and saying, I'm seeing these cognitive changes, I'm seeing these changes with my mom or dad, and what's going on, and also a change in their ADLs or IADLs or their ambulation, their walking, is something is off. So that is considered pretty serious. I'm just going to touch a little bit on dementia because Drake is going to be talking about some of that. But there are different types of dementia. There's not one type. So as I said, getting a good neurological exam is really important. Most people are familiar with Alzheimer's. They hear that term, but not everybody that has dementia has Alzheimer's. There's frontal temporal disorder, which is something that has been in the news lately because Bruce Willis has that as a diagnosis. Vascular dementia, which is usually like small strokes. This is what my family has in their history, where they can be cognizant 1 minute and then the next minute they're not able to speak, or you know, they kind of freeze because they're having like small strokes. And sometimes it clears, sometimes it doesn't, but they usually have to be on some type of medication for that type of thing. Lewy body dementia, you hear that, and there's certain signs with that as well, which, you know, that has a whole nother set of symptoms. And then there's early onset dementia, which is anything under the age of 65. And actually, the health community is seeing that more and more. And they're not sure why, but they are seeing it as young as people in their 20s. But usually it's somebody that's maybe in their 40s where you're seeing some changes. But it's defined as anybody under the age of 65. Let's see here. So with dementia, there is a loss of cognitive functioning, thinking, remembering, and reasoning. Unfortunately, you can slow the decline, but you cannot stop the process. The process continues. So you see those ads, like somewhere out there, there's a, you know, Alzheimer's patient that is a survivor. Well, that's real. Dementia is a fatal disease. I mean, it progresses. So you're not going to be the same 6 months from now as you are today if you have that disease. So you can slow the decline. You hear about all the medications that are out there, and they're making more and more progress on it. But you have poor or declining short-term recall. You have personality changes, and sometimes it can be aggression or agitation. People that never were like that, all of a sudden they're becoming agitated or aggressive towards their loved one. And that's usually who they take it out on. We see very often with couples that the spouse that doesn't have the dementia is the one that's usually the one that's taking the brunt of the aggression. And so the other family members will be, well, we don't see that. You know, well, they're not with you. So give them the benefit of the doubt and talk to them a little bit more about it. It could be a particular adult child that lives with them or is closer to them that will get the brunt of those things. So that is real. Some of it, the inability to perform the ADLs or the IADLs, as I said, not understanding how to put a coat on, not knowing what a shoe is, really common things, not understanding how they work or how to use them. Making decisions or finishing tasks, following instructions, or problem solving. So they might start something and then not be able to finish it. We all do that to a certain extent. I think everybody is. This is the part that they're the most afraid about. But you see it on a pretty blatant basis. We're talking extreme. Maybe putting your keys in the refrigerator or, things like that. You can't problem solve. The alarm is going off and you have no idea where that is coming from. You can't process that. Oftentimes what I see with folks is, well, you know what? Dad has tried 25 different hearing aids and nothing is working. You know what? It's the processing. It's not the hearing. It's the processing of that information that person is having a struggle with. And no hearing aid, unfortunately, is going to help that. So when you start seeing that, then that kind of cues you into it's not just the volume or, the sound around, it's actually how they are processing that information. So the inability to concentrate or process the information. Word finding or communication deficits. They can't come up with the word. And again, we all do this. I am notorious for it. But, it's a regular thing. It's kind of like a little child who doesn't know a word for something and then they come up with a description and you know what they're talking about, but it's not the correct word. They have a decline in their verbal memory. They have a decline in spatial orientation. And one of the biggest cues that I like to see or like to use is lack of social awareness and humor. If you are sarcastic and that person is not getting that sarcasm, you know that there might be some issues with the processing. It's just a subtle thing, but you might catch it that way. If there is a humor or banter going on in your household and all of a sudden that person is not catching those things, then there might be a processing difficulty with that. So those are just some subtle things. Drake is going to talk about some preventative things. I just have a couple more things and then we're going to go on to that. So that would be my next logical thing in this presentation, but he's going to talk about brain health. One thing with anybody aging, it doesn't matter if you're 18 or if you're 75, please make sure that you have a power of attorney for health care. Next month in April is Health Care Decision Month. It is an important thing to have a power of attorney for health care in place at any stage over the age of 18. Oftentimes what we see is that people will have done one with their wills and things, but then their spouse dies and they have nobody else listed on their power of attorney for health care. So make sure that is a current document, that you have two people down that are willing to make those healthcare decisions for you. It only becomes active when there's two physicians who sign that you are no longer able to make those decisions. So you're not giving away that power right now. You're just making a choice that when I am unable to speak for myself, Drake's going to be able to do it for me because he knows what I want. And that's what the important part is. So if you haven't done it, please do an updated one. It is a state of Wisconsin form. Sometimes the lawyer will jazz it up a bit, but it's a state of Wisconsin form. So just make sure that you have it done. It does not have to be notarized. Just two people, and social workers can be those two people. So please do that. Sometimes mental health and dementia needs some further legal involvement. So the state of Wisconsin does have laws as far as emergency detention, inpatient treatment, alcohol and drug rehab, guardianship and protective placement, and elder abuse. We are involved with all of those as case managers over a period of time, depending on what's going on with that individual. So some don't need any of it, some need all of it. It just depends on what is the situation with them. So at least the power of attorney for healthcare is the basic. And anything beyond that, anybody that you're working with would guide you in what else would potentially be needed legally. Some resources to start out with. It's always tempting to hand out a ton of brochures about all different places. You look at some of the guidelines for resources, and they're just loaded. The journey with aging it's about this thick, and you don't even know where to start. So they're nice to have. They're useful for some people, but you really have to know how to hone in on what it is that you're looking for. So we recommend, or I recommend, that if you are struggling with a mental health need or a dementia question, that you start with the person's doctor. They're really the one to start out with. Are there other tests that they can do? What are they thinking is going on? It does become difficult if that person doesn't give you permission to do that, though. And sometimes you have to work around that and try to talk to them about, boy, I'd really like to come in on your appointment with you. I'd like to, find out what's going on, if there's something I can help with. Also, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, or the ADRC, as we talked about, which is kind of a one-stop shop. Most often, they will probably connect you with one of us. Sometimes they'll actually connect you with, let's say, elder abuse, if it's a clear elder abuse situation, or if they feel that it might be an elder abuse situation. Or connect you with alcohol and drug resources. But usually in Dane County, the focal points in the senior centers are really the contact points. We have social workers that are skilled in looking at the senior population and what they need. Sometimes it's a one-time visit. Sometimes we know clients over periods of time. We may not intervene with them at any point. We might see them on a social basis. And then all of a sudden, we're noticing changes, so we're going to be a little more concerned about that. We have a meal program. We have a home-delivered meal program. So those are all things that we assess people on those. And at least the home-delivered meal, we have an assessment that we need to do and kind of look at what are the supports this person has, what kind of needs they have, those types of things. I know you had NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness, come and talk to you. That's a great place to start if you know for sure that it's a mental illness. But with a geriatric population, it's probably better to start with the senior population. Some do, though. They come to us, and they already have a case manager through the mental health services. There's some programs. I gave Sarah a list of some of the programs throughout Dane County. You can't just walk in and ask for those services, but they're out there. And so there's different, what we call, different towers of service. There might be the mental health, silo, and then there's the aging silo, there's the developmental disability silo. They all have different services. Sometimes they cross over, sometimes they don't, but they might have a case manager that is with that agency, with a mental health agency, because they've had a lifelong mental health diagnosis. The Alzheimer's and Dementia Alliance, that's also one that provides a lot of outreach and services to people. I don't know if you've done any of the, like the dementia, well, not the dementia friendly, but the training where you put the gloves and the goggles on. Have you done any of that? Okay. So you can do that. You can, the Dementia Alliance will do some of that where they'll put the goggles and things in your shoes, and you go into a dark room and you have glasses on and gloves on, and you have to try to do tasks. fold laundry or sort socks, or I'm trying to think what else it is. So it's trying to mimic what somebody who has a hearing or vision loss would experience, or somebody who has processing, cognitive decline, on what they might experience. So it's not exactly, but it does give you some ideas how challenged it is. So that is a great resource as well. And then also, who is familiar with the 988? Okay, so the mental health hotline it's a hotline for anybody to call if they are experiencing a mental health crisis. If they need to talk to somebody, it doesn't matter what age you are, but there is a 988. It's just like 911, but 988 you'd get a counselor on there. And they would talk to you and help you out at the time, or they would then maybe try to connect you with something that would be a local resource. But that's something that has started recently. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. And I think that we will have a question and answer time after Drake finishes. He might answer some of your questions. And so at the end of Drake's presentation, then we will do questions. However, while Lori was talking and giving us so much information, I was remembering about our End the Stigma board in the back, and I forgot to mention that. There are index cards in the baskets at the end of the pews. And another way that I'm going to report back to regarding my grant is to show ways that we've ended the stigma regarding mental illness. So if there's something new that you've learned this afternoon, or a stigma that has been busted for you, please write that down on the card, and there's a bulletin board on the back. We're just trying to get a visual representation of how successful we are at ending the stigma surrounding mental illness. And I know that there were at least 3 things that Lori brought up that I was like, oh, I forgot to talk about the cards, because I want to write those things down on a card and put them up. So please do that. It's very helpful for us to see the ways that we are making a difference with our programs. And with that, I now introduce Drake, who some of you know from the Verona Senior Center, and I'll let him talk about brain health.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Drake, and I am a case manager at the Verona Senior Center. So just kind of a 30-second elevator speech about what I do there. I manage a caseload of 60-plus seniors in the Verona area. So if folks need resources, they can come to me and I can put them through to a place like the ADRC, or I can put them through to any sort of resource they need. If somebody would need a referral to a local senior living facility, I can help with that. Or if people just need kind of somebody to talk to. So I think people get confused with the term case manager a little bit. I'm a social worker by trade. I'm a social work graduate in college. So it's basically a social worker, kind of more focused on gathering resources for folks. So I think my presentation today is going to tie in really well with what Lori was talking about. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview on dementia, but then mostly talk about ways that you can keep your brain happy and healthy. So this goes into reducing your risk of dementia. This goes into ways of reducing your risk of other mental health crises. So that's going to be the brunt of what I talk about. And I have a couple of videos and other things in there. So I'll get underway here. So my personal connection to dementia, so that's me in the red coat there, and that guy in the middle was my grandpa on my mom's side, and his name was Dan, or as we called him, Pa, and he went through dementia. So as probably most of you, if not everybody in this room, has some connection to dementia or other mental health crises. I have one myself, so I kind of wanted to start with a personal anecdote. So the man in the middle there, that is my grandpa, and he suffered through dementia. So I kind of had a firsthand look at what it does to an individual. Granted, my mom was very good at kind of sheltering me from a lot of it because I was young. There were times where you could definitely tell, something was up. So that is my personal connection. But like I said, if I was a betting man, I would bet every single person in this room knows somebody who has gone through dementia or another crisis or is going through one currently. So just a very brief overview of dementia, because Lori did hit a lot of good points there. But overall, as you can see this definition here, it's a group of conditions characterized by impairment of at least 2 brain functions. So it's an umbrella term. A lot of people think dementia is it's one thing. You have dementia and you have dementia. But it's really an umbrella term that covers Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, all these other kinds. So it's kind of an umbrella term to cover the impairment of brain function. And as Lori kind of briefly talked about, there's a big difference between normal brain aging and dementia. So if you have dementia, if you have depression, if you have any of these mental health issues, that is not a normal part of aging. So as kind of Lori talked about, a good way that we explain normal aging versus kind of one to be a little bit concerned is, say that you are someone who makes coffee every single day on the same coffee maker for the last 30 years. And then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you don't know what you're doing. It's like you've never used this machine before. Then there might be a reason to be concerned. But if you're like me and you call one thing another thing, or you screw up words, or you stumble on words, that's okay. Some brain aging is normal, but when it gets to a point where it's severely interfering with everyday life, that's a time to be a little bit more concerned. So, is it curable? Unfortunately, no. There is no cure as of now. The good news is that there are countless medications that are being tested, already being used. It seems like every single month there is a new medication that comes out that is designed to slow the progression of the disease, help with certain symptoms. So in the near future, there might be a miracle pill that wipes it all out, and that would be wonderful. Right now, there is not that, but there are a number of medications that are making headway and making great progress, and month by month, there are more that come out and more that pop up. So science is working on it, and my hope, I think everybody's hope, is that one day it can be completely eradicated, because dementia is a very awful thing to see a loved one go through. So one day I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that it can be gone completely. Is it preventable? Yes and no. So I'm going to talk about a lot of tips here, and this goes for anything mental health related: dementia, depression, anxiety, anything that has to do with your overall brain health. Some of it can be prevented. That being said, you could just be dealt a bad card in life, and that happens, a bad hand. So for example, my grandpa that I showed, he also had lung cancer at the same time that he had dementia. He never smoked a day in his life. And when you think of lung cancer, you think of smokers. But he just got dealt a bad hand. He never smoked a day in his life, and he still ends up with lung cancer. You could do all of these tips that I give you in the coming presentation, and you could still have dementia. So I'm not going to sit here and say, if you follow these tips that I give you, you're never going to get dementia. I wish I could say that, but I don't have quite that power, and the brain is a mysterious thing where you could do everything right, and like I said, you could still be dealt a bad hand, unfortunately. But there are ways to reduce your risk, definitely. So here's the first short video. So this is just kind of an overview of cognitive decline. And then after this, we're going to get more into brain health and tips and tricks that you can use to lower your risk of certain things. But I think that this was is a great overview. And the volume's going to be up a little bit, so we want to make sure that people watching online can hear. So hopefully it's loud enough, and hopefully it's not too loud for folks.
People are living much longer, and a common consequence of aging is loss of thinking skills. There's no clear line between what's sort of normal loss of thinking skills and disease. Being able to systematically study that makes it a little bit more challenging.
There's a great amount of noise, a great amount of misunderstanding out in the world about what the causes are of dementia, and more importantly, what you can do to prevent.
In 2015, 4 to 5 million adults in the United States were suffering from dementia, costing more than $200 billion. As the population grows and people live longer, the number of people with dementia will increase.
When people become impaired, it doesn't just affect them, it affects everybody around them. Their families have to take care of them. This has enormous effects on the whole society in ways that lots of other diseases don't.
The National Institute on Aging at NIH asked the national academies to convene a committee of experts to evaluate the latest research on how to protect cognitive health. The committee looked at studies on 3 types of conditions: age-related cognitive decline, which can be a normal part of aging; mild cognitive impairment, in which a person shows more notable problems but can adapt and live independently; and clinical Alzheimer's type dementia, in which someone can no longer function independently. This includes Alzheimer's disease, which is the leading cause of dementia, and other diseases with similar symptoms.
When people are developing mild problems, we ask about things like how often they're forgetting appointments, how often they're misplacing things, how often they're having trouble paying their bills. When a disease progresses to the point where someone has dementia, then the forgetting is not mild like that anymore. Then people have trouble remembering something from minute to minute, and sometimes from second to second.
Cognitive decline and dementia progress slowly, and damage in the brain often begins a decade or more before any symptoms show up. For a while, the brain can adapt, which can mask the early stages of the disease. But by the time someone starts exhibiting symptoms, damage in the brain could be extensive.
Long before someone has trouble remembering names, getting lost riding a car, there will have been detectable changes in the brain that then progress and lead to dementia.
Researchers are actively investigating treatments for dementia, but the best possible solution is to prevent the disease altogether.
When nerve cells die in the brain, we don't have any way of rejuvenating them. So the notion is that if you can intervene really early, then you might be able to prevent that process.
Through their review, the National Academies Committee did not find any interventions that were shown to definitively prevent cognitive decline or dementia. The committee did identify 3 interventions where the evidence was encouraging but inconclusive.
Encouraging but inconclusive evidence, and those words are important. If you engage in these 3 activities, which by the way are good for you anyway, then at a minimum we can say they might help.
One intervention is cognitive training, which includes an array of exercises aimed at enhancing problem solving, memory, and speed of processing.
Many people assume that cognitive training means computer-based brain games. It's a much more complicated intervention than just sitting at the computer by yourself. There is no evidence, in fact, that the computer-based brain games actually make a difference.
A second intervention is managing high blood pressure in people with hypertension. This can be accomplished taking blood pressure management medications and sometimes through lifestyle interventions such as diet and exercise. Several studies show a connection between controlling high blood pressure in midlife and reducing risk of dementia later.
Hypertension is an insidious disease. Many people who are hypertensive don't know it. What's important is that you don't try to control it in someone who is 70 for the first time, but it needs to be done in middle age because that's when the brain changes.
A third intervention is being physically active. For example, increasing
doesn't mean going out to join a gym or to start doing weightlifting or anything like that. It just means that if you are a person who's pretty sedentary, then you can start by just simply walking.
We know that over short periods of time, in clinical trials, physical activity actually appears to show cognitive benefit. And we also know that there are changes in the brain that we can measure, like on magnetic resonance imaging scans.
Managing your blood pressure, physical exercise, it's good for you. Cognitive training won't hurt you, and it looks like it may help you.
To know for sure if these interventions prevent cognitive decline and dementia, more research is needed. The National Academies Committee also recommends a number of ways to improve future studies. One area of focus is enhancing our ability to understand and predict disease progression.
So sometimes we might be using a scan of some sort that tells us about the structure of the brain, that tells us about the proteins in the brain, to try to get a really good prediction of what's going to happen to somebody in 10 years or in 5 years.
At present, a lot of research on cognitive decline and dementia falls short because studies don't follow people for long enough or look at a broad range of the population.
Do you have to follow people for a very long time in order to see if you've made a real difference? The standard clinical trial for patients with Alzheimer's disease might be 18 months. For people with mild cognitive impairment, might be 3 years. But a lot of these changes take much longer than that to progress. And so we don't have a lot of studies that have followed people with interventions for long periods of time.
We need to go out to the community and get people who don't really come to the hospital, with different kinds of occupations, and get them involved in research so that we can see how these interventions work across different populations. And we want to be able to inform the public about what they can do to prevent cognitive decline and live long, healthy lives. That's really what we care about.
Learn more and download the full report at nationalacademies.org/.
All right. So yeah, as the guy said in the video, there we go. So yeah, as he said in the video, we can't say 100% sure that what we're going to go over here is going to guarantee that you're not going to get dementia or depression or anxiety. But nothing that we're going to talk about is bad for you by any means. It's all things that you should be practicing in daily life. So there may be other hidden benefits as well. So nothing that we're going to talk about is going to hurt you in any way. If anything, it can help. And if, hey, it gives you a 10% chance of not getting dementia or not going through depression or anxiety or worsening anything, then, hey, I'll take those chances. So how can we keep our brain happy and healthy? The first thing is, and which surprises some folks, is that diet. Diet can play a part. There is mounting evidence that there is a pretty strong connection between the brain and the heart. And if you have heart conditions, that might be negatively affecting your brain and vice versa. So diet is a big part of it. And what I always tell folks kind of when we're looking at this slide is, just because this image here says that green leafy vegetables are good for the brain, which they are, if your doctor has advised you against eating them because of vitamin K or whatever it is, obviously follow what your doctor's telling you. Don't override that and start pounding broccoli, and then you damage another part of your body. But if any of these foods fit into your diet and you want to start incorporating them or eating more of them, that is fantastic. I think a fun one is, there's two fun ones. I think coffee, there's been a lot of research going back and forth about, is coffee good for you, is coffee bad for you? Basically, as they say, everything in moderation. So the caffeine content, if you're able to drink caffeinated coffee, actually stimulates the brain. You can be more alert, you can be more focused. And then dark chocolate is another fun one. So there's an excuse to eat some chocolate. what you want to look for is go to the grocery store, go to the chocolate bar aisle, and look for the highest percent cocoa that you can find. If you're eating milk chocolate, I'm going to have a Reese's every night. Well, you're not really doing yourself any good. But it might be making you happy, so at the end of the day, that's great too. That's a form of self-care, which we'll talk about. But if you have dark chocolate, so if you go and you find a bar that's 90% dark chocolate and you like it, that is fantastic. Eat a square or two of that a day. Some folks, struggle with that really dark chocolate because it is bitter, and I've learned to love it, so I enjoy that 90% dark chocolate. The highest percentage that you can eat and you enjoy is great, and yeah, I think that's fun. You can eat some chocolate and say you're doing your mind some good, so that is fun. But then obviously we all know that fatty fish, of course, in moderation, has those positive fats, have those positive oils. As we know, berries are good for you. Nuts in general, high in calories, but very good for your brain and good for your heart, especially walnuts. Walnuts are another kind of controversial nut, I guess. A lot of people don't like them, but if you do like them, that is a great snack. It's great for your heart. It's great for your brain. So brain exercises that they talked about in the video. Basically, the point of any sort of brain exercise is doing anything that stimulates your mind. So if that's board and card games, if that's creative writing, if that's cooking, it's a lot of fun stuff, and it's fun stuff you might already be doing. Puzzles. I know my parents love puzzles. They always have one going at their place. Learning a new skill, arts and crafts, all of this is great for your brain. It engages your brain. It keeps you active. And one that people don't often think about is kind of mixing up your routine or finding a new way home. I don't know if anybody else has this experience, but when you're driving home or you're driving to a place you've been a lot, you kind of zone out and then you just show up at where you needed to be and you don't really remember any of the drive. So one kind of fun way to trick your brain is take a new route home that you've never taken before. Take a new route to the grocery store, because what that does is you are forcing your brain to think about where you're going rather than taking the same old route that you've taken 1,000 times before. So it can be simple changes like that. Mix up your route home or your route to work, and then it makes your brain think a little bit, and it's an easy change to make. Another one is physical exercise. I know you're probably tired of everybody hounding on you to exercise. I totally get it. But there is strong research that physical exercise, while it does help your body, it also helps your brain big time. So as they said in the video, this doesn't mean that I'm going to go out and become a marathon runner, because I'd probably die. But, it doesn't mean you have to incorporate, get a gym membership and you go 7 days a week for 2 hours. This can just be as simple as, you're not really somebody that takes walks, and now you start going on 1 walk a week, and that 1 walk a week maybe turns into 2 or 3 walks a week. So it doesn't mean going all in and becoming a bodybuilder or anything like that. It can just mean increasing what you are already doing. So if you normally take a half an hour walk, that's fantastic. Maybe take a 45-minute walk or go on a longer trail. Just increasing what you're doing can create good habits and can have benefits for your heart and for your brain. Oh, and just the last thing on that. The Verona High School has a very good warmed swimming pool. And they have it so seniors or anybody who's going, they can kind of pull up right to the doors. You don't have to walk through the whole high school. They have an access just to the pool. So I would say reach out to the new high school if anybody's interested. It's a really nice facility, and swimming is excellent. And it's less taxing on your body. Instead of running, obviously when you're swimming, you're kind of weightless. So it's good for your body and it's great for your heart. Another one is be social. This ties into depression, anxiety, dementia, everything. If you are social, you're doing something right. So the fact that all of you are here today is great. You're out, you're doing something, you're engaging your brain. That is fantastic. So it helps relieve stress, coping with disease. Go visit a family and friend, go out to an event like this, which you are all at, which is excellent. Volunteer. If you want to come volunteer at the senior center, we would love to have you. But anything like that gets you out, talking with other folks, making connections is great for your brain. And I've heard more of it talked about recently, but COVID isolation due to some restrictions, which obviously we needed to keep seniors safe, but that isolation did have a pretty strong negative effect, especially on seniors. And even with my own grandma, we think her being isolated and not us being able to see her as much as we would like, we think that definitely took a toll on her. And before pre-pandemic and everything, she was living on her own, and now she's in assisted living, kind of teetering on needing more memory care. So I think that definitely accelerated things. But the fact that more places are opening up and you can get out if you're comfortable, I know that there are still a lot of people that struggle with that, my mom included, because she has some other conditions that make her way more susceptible to a dangerous case if she were to catch it. But if you are comfortable enough going out, that is fantastic, because it did unfortunately take a toll on folks. It was just one of the many harsh realities of the pandemic. So that did not help things in regards to mental health at all. So the brain and heart connection, as I talked about, there's more and more evidence that these two are connected. So think of it as anything that's good for your heart is also good for your brain, and vice versa. So that means quitting smoking, using any sort of tobacco products. Limiting alcohol is a big one too, as we know that affects a lot of organs. It has some negative effects on your heart. So in turn, it has some negative effects on your brain. So like I said, anything that helps one is most likely going to help the other. So think about these two major organs, key points in your body working together. And in order for one to work to its full potential, you got to take care of the other. So the brain and the heart are well connected, and we have to take care of both. So prioritize your mental health. This is a big one. And I'll touch on self-care. I think it's the next slide, or it's coming up, but practice self-care regularly. I will pull up a slide that shows ways to take care of yourself and ways to incorporate self-care into your life, but it's a big one. I lead a caregiver support group at the senior center, and what we always tell those folks that are full-time caregivers for somebody at home, you are not able to take care of somebody else if you're not taking care of yourself first, and that's a big one. As much as we would like to put all of our energy into other people, at the end of the day, you got to take care of yourself. So self-care is a big one, and I think it's the next slide, but I'll give you some examples of that. So here we go. So 25 easy self-care activities. So it can be something as simple as going for a walk, reading a book, watching your favorite movie, doing anything that you enjoy to kind of let stress be on the back burner. Set some time up, and it seems silly, but I tell folks if you are struggling finding time to do things that you enjoy, whether it's working on a puzzle, whether it's listening to music, whether it's going to a movie, put it in your calendar. Schedule some time. Say from 1 to 2:30 on this day, I'm going to do something that I enjoy. It seems silly to put that in your calendar, but that's a great way to make sure that you actually follow through and do something that you enjoy. All of this can have a positive impact on your mental health and just your health as a whole. So like I said, if one thing that brings you a ton of joy is having a Reese's cup a day, then go for it. That is a great form of self-care, doing something that you enjoy, eating a food that you like, in moderation, of course. Self-care, you have to take care of yourself. And like I said, if you struggle to find that time, as silly as it seems, put it in your calendar and block off a chunk of time and make sure you do something that you enjoy and that helps you de-stress. So here's another video, the importance of sleep. This is a shorter video. I think it's only about 3 minutes, but it hits on the key points of what makes sleep so important and why some people struggle with sleep and don't get as much as they probably need.
I've been taking care of my mom for a long time. Trying to balance work, my children, and caring for my mom is a lot. At the end of each day, it's hard to relax and stop my mind from worrying, let alone sleep. I'm so tired of being tired.
Since my wife's diagnosis, I must work more hours to support our family. I work long, long days, and I take on caregiver responsibilities too. I drink coffee to help me stay energized for my wife's appointments. Even though I feel exhausted at the end of each day, I just can't sleep at all. My mind continues to race when I want to rest.
My son means the world to me. I want to do everything I can to support him and get his mental health back on track. I gave up my gym membership, skipped most of my book club gatherings. I just feel tired all the time.
Insufficient sleep may have negative effects on one's mental health. Caring for others should also include taking care of ourselves. Getting enough sleep is a vital part of self-care. Most adults need between 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. But life can sometimes get in the way of getting the recommended hours of quality sleep. Sleep deprivation can occur when one doesn't get enough sleep on a consistent basis. Sleep deprivation may lead to increased irritability, lack of concentration, difficulty in making decisions, and forgetfulness. It may also contribute to additional physical health problems. Talk with your doctor to learn more about the risks related to lack of sleep. Here are tips that may help to improve the quality of your sleep. Create a quiet, cool, dark sleep space. Avoid electronics before or while in bed. Avoid stimulants like caffeine late in the day. Some lifestyle changes that can also benefit your sleep and mental health include creating a calming routine before bed, such as taking a warm bath, reading a book, or doing relaxation exercise. Trying to keep a consistent sleep schedule. Waking up and going to bed at the same time each day, even on the weekends.
Since I established my own bedtime routine, I fall asleep faster and feel more rested during the day.
Cutting out my afternoon coffee and better managing my time help me get a better night's sleep.
Now that I'm better rested, I find myself more present and I'm able to enjoy more time with my family.
Changing a few simple habits, making sleep a priority, can be a winning combination for your own self-care, as well as for those you care for. Take the time to sleep on it.
So another really interesting part of sleep that I did not know about was that when you sleep and when you're in deep sleep, fluid comes up from your spine and kind of washes your brain literally away of some of these negative proteins. And there was a video that I included in this presentation that for whatever reason isn't in there this time, but it talks about exactly that and how there's more research about how, if this deep sleep is interrupted and your brain can't really finish that whole washing cycle, that buildup of proteins or just negative stuff in the brain, you're more likely to have dementia, you're more likely to have other mental health issues. So you want to have as much of that deep sleep as possible and try to let it get through that complete kind of brain wash, which is funny, but that's literally what happens. So that deep sleep is key. So in conclusion, if there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you could take away from this presentation today, I would say eat well, incorporate some of those foods if they fit into your diet that we talked about, stay active, go for walks, come down to the senior center, volunteer, get engaged in your community, anything to kind of get your brain going. Sleep well, as we just talked about, sleep is key. Exercise your brain and engage in self-care. Take time to do things that you enjoy and to take care of yourself. So I think that is just about it. So if you have any questions about the presentation, I'm by no means a doctor, so I probably couldn't answer everything. But or if you have any questions about the senior center as a whole, I'm more than welcome to answer those, because I know that there are sometimes misconceptions about what we do there. Any sort of questions about my role, about the presentation, or about the senior center in general, I would be more than happy to answer.
For the people watching online, we need to use the microphone. So the question is, what is the support group for caregivers at the senior center?
Yeah, and when does it meet? So it meets the first and third Tuesdays of every month at 10 a.m. And just kind of a heads up, so the way that it's set up is it is for the caregiver, not the care recipient. The reason that we do that is so caregivers could talk openly and freely kind of about the struggles that they're going through. And you run into some folks that sometimes are frustrated and deservedly so. It's a tough job, so we want to make sure that nobody's uncomfortable or put in an uncomfortable position if they're a care recipient by some of the things that the caregivers say, because we want it to be a very open place. We share resources, we bounce kind of people's experiences off one another. So yes, caregivers group is at the senior center the first and third Tuesday of every month at 10.
Are there other questions for both Drake and Lori?
What about sleep 3 hours every day or taking medication for the sleep?
So sleeping like during the day? So, and that's a result? That's okay. And that's a result of medication? So, okay. So is the sleeping during the day because you take medication, or? Okay.
Yeah, so that comes back to just making sure that you have those discussions with your doctor, because obviously if you're just getting 2 or 3 hours every night, you're not able to get that deep, restful sleep. So if it's a medication that helps with that, then that is fantastic. But you want to try and make sure that you get that deep sleep, those at least 7 hours, so that your brain has time to, do whatever it needs to do. So just have those discussions with your doctor, and if they find that medication is the best route to help with that, then whatever is in your best interest, they'll take into account. Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions?
It's not really a question. I can add a little bit to the Verona High School warm water pool. You can take your walker right up to the pool, and it's what is that, 0 inch, and slowly can walk in. Someone I know helps someone with her walker get up there, and then this woman who needed the walker took off and swam a whole bunch of laps. So, it just it's a wonderful thing. I've been hearing a lot of wonderful reviews on how good it is. So anyway, I just thought I would mention it for anybody online or here.
Yes, and with exercise, I highly encourage you to get creative for what works for you and your physical abilities.
Okay, and then also the hours of the pool exercise, or pool times, and the price.
I know those are all online, but maybe Drake knows offhand.
I know a little bit, so I think I would say definitely call the high school. I think the hours vary per day because some classes use the space, but I think they always make sure to have at least a few hours a day open to the public. And as for price, I think it's really inexpensive and affordable. I think, and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure for seniors in the Verona area, you can get kind of this gold card that gives you free access to the pool, and I think it also gives you discounted tickets to like shows the high school put on, to sports games, to anything like that. So it's kind of a community focused pass. I think they call it like a gold card. So you can call I think they refer people to the administration office for the district, but we've had questions about that at the senior center, and we refer people to the school district, but I think it is very affordable from what I can remember. Mm-hmm.
So the gold card helps you meet multiple aspects of the brain health activities. You can be social, you can be engaged in the community, you can get your exercise. And also, Cindy, just to tell you, I think some of the information is under the Verona Aquatic Center as well. So it's another way to find out. Any other questions? So remember to fill out your index cards. And it doesn't have to be just from things we learned today, though I filled out 5 cards today. So to help us sort of track of how we are doing our part to end the stigma regarding mental illness and keep the conversation going so that more people can feel less alone and they can feel understood and enjoy happy lives. So thank you very much, Lori and Drake. We greatly appreciate you taking your Sunday afternoon with us. Thank you to those of you that are online, and thank you everyone here. Have a good afternoon.